A pediatric nurse working 3 jobs to survive made a decision that would save a dying child's life. What she didn't know was that this one selfless act would completely rewrite her destiny in ways she never imagined possible. By the time the truth was revealed, her world had already been turned upside down forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights in the pediatric ward at Desert Springs Medical Center hummed their familiar tune as Ashley Rodriguez finished checking on her last patient of the night shift. Her scrubs, faded from countless washes, hung loosely on her small frame. The digital clock on the wall read 6:47 a.m., and exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders like an old familiar friend. She had been working for 16 straight hours, covering for a colleague who had called in sick, and her feet ached in the worn sneakers she couldn't afford to replace. Ashley paused at the nurse's station to complete her charting, her pen moving methodically across the papers. Around her, the morning shift was beginning to trickle in, fresh-faced and energetic in a way that reminded her of herself 5 years ago when she first graduated from nursing school. Back then, she had dreams of making a real difference, of having time to truly connect with her patients instead of rushing from one crisis to the next. Now, at 28, those dreams felt like luxuries she couldn't afford. Her phone buzzed against her hip, and she glanced down to see a text from her mother. "Mija, the rent notice came again. They want it by Friday or we have to move." Ashley's stomach twisted into the familiar knot that had become her constant companion. She quickly typed back, "I'll figure it out, Mama, don't worry." But worry was all she seemed to do these days. The apartment she shared with her mother in Maryvale was small and old, with pipes that groaned and air conditioning that worked only when it felt generous. Carmen Rodriguez had raised Ashley alone after her father left when she was 12, working double shifts at a laundry service until arthritis made it impossible to continue. Now, at 55, Carmen's hands were gnarled and painful, making even simple tasks difficult. Ashley had become the sole provider, juggling her full-time position at Desert Springs with weekend shifts at a community clinic in South Phoenix and occasional private nursing gigs whenever she could find them. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days caring for children in a state-of-the-art medical facility while worrying about whether she could afford groceries for the week. Her student loans from nursing school ate up nearly 40% of her income, leaving little room for anything beyond basic survival. She had learned to stretch a dollar until it screamed, to make meals from whatever was on clearance, and to ignore the persistent ache in her back from sleeping on a mattress that had seen better days a decade ago. Ashley gathered her things and headed toward the elevator, ready to drive across town to the weekend clinic where she would spend the next 8 hours providing basic care to families who, like her, couldn't afford much but needed everything. The clinic operated out of a converted strip mall, serving primarily Spanish-speaking families who often paid in cash they could barely spare. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid an extra $300 each weekend, money that often meant the difference between keeping the lights on and sitting in darkness. As the elevator descended, Ashley caught her reflection in the polished metal doors. Dark circles shadowed her brown eyes, and her black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail that had seen better days. She looked tired because she was tired, bone-deep and soul-weary in a way that sleep couldn't fix. But she also looked determined because giving up wasn't an option when people depended on you. Meanwhile, across the city in Paradise Valley, David Thompson stood in his home office overlooking the pristine golf course that stretched behind his estate. The morning sun painted the desert landscape in shades of gold and amber, and the silence was broken only by the gentle hum of perfectly calibrated climate control. His office was a study in understated luxury, with custom mahogany shelving, holding awards, and photographs documenting his rise in the renewable energy industry. Thompson Energy Solutions had made him one of the wealthiest men in Arizona, with solar farms and wind installations across the Southwest, generating both clean power and massive profits. But this morning, none of that mattered. David stared at the medical reports spread across his desk, each page containing words that felt like physical blows. Chronic kidney disease, stage 4, dialysis 3 times a week, transplant list. His 6-year-old son Tommy lay sleeping upstairs, small and pale, in his dinosaur-themed bedroom, unaware that his kidneys were failing and his time was running out. The diagnosis had come 6 months ago, delivered by Dr. Patricia Williams, in the same calm, professional tone she probably used to discuss less devastating news. Tommy's kidneys, for reasons no one could fully explain, were shutting down. The little boy who once ran through the house pretending to be a T-Rex now spent hours hooked to a dialysis machine, his energy sapped by the very treatments keeping him alive. David had immediately mobilized every resource at his disposal. The best nephrologists in the country had examined Tommy. Experimental treatments had been explored and discarded. Private jets had carried them to specialists in Boston, Los Angeles, and Houston. Money, it turned out, could buy access to the finest medical care in the world, but it couldn't buy the one thing Tommy needed most: a matching kidney. The transplant list was long, and children's organs were rare. David had been tested immediately, as had Tommy's mother, David's ex-wife Rachel, who lived in Seattle with her new family. Neither was a match. Extended family members had volunteered, but the genetics hadn't aligned. With each passing week, Tommy grew weaker, and David felt increasingly helpless, despite his vast resources. He picked up one of the photographs on his desk, taken last summer before the diagnosis. Tommy grinned at the camera, gap-toothed and radiant, wearing a plastic dinosaur costume and flexing his tiny muscles. David's throat tightened as he remembered that day, how they had spent hours in the backyard digging for fossils that David had secretly buried the night before. Tommy's laughter had echoed off the mountains, pure and joyful and seemingly endless. Now that same little boy struggled to make it through a day without exhaustion. The dialysis helped, but it was a temporary solution to a permanent problem. Dr. Williams had been gentle but direct. Without a transplant, Tommy's prognosis was grim. The waiting list could take years, time they might not have. David closed his eyes and rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of his failure as a father. He had built an empire, employed thousands of people, and changed the landscape of renewable energy. But he couldn't save his own son. All the money in the world couldn't manufacture a compatible kidney or move Tommy to the top of the transplant list, ahead of other children who were equally deserving and equally desperate. His phone rang, interrupting his dark thoughts. The caller ID showed Dr. Williams's office number, and David's heart immediately began racing. Calls from the hospital outside of regular appointments usually meant bad news, and he wasn't sure he could handle any more bad news today. "Mr. Thompson," Dr. Williams's voice was carefully neutral, "I need you to bring Tommy in this afternoon. His latest blood work shows some concerning changes, and we need to discuss adjusting his treatment protocol." David's hand tightened on the phone. What kind of changes? His creatinine levels have risen significantly since last week. It's not unexpected given the progression of his condition, but we need to be proactive about managing his care. The words washed over David, like ice water. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He understood enough medical terminology to know that rising creatinine levels meant Tommy's kidney function was declining faster than they had hoped. Time already precious, was becoming even more scarce. "We'll be there at 2, David said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. After ending the call, he walked upstairs to check on Tommy, who was still sleeping peacefully among his collection of stuffed dinosaurs. The little boy's face was pale against the bright pillowcase, and David could see the slight swelling around his eyes that had become more pronounced in recent weeks. Tommy stirred as David entered, opening sleepy blue eyes that looked too large in his thin face. "Morning, Daddy," Tommy said, his voice raspy from sleep. "Are we going to the hospital today?" David forced a smile and sat on the edge of the bed. "Just for a quick visit to see Dr. Williams. Maybe we can stop for ice cream afterward." Tommy's face brightened slightly. "Can we get the kind with dinosaur gummies?" "Absolutely," David said, his heart breaking at how such a simple pleasure could bring his son joy. "Whatever kind you want." As Tommy drifted back to sleep, David made a silent promise. Whatever it took, however much it cost, whoever he had to call or beg or bargain with, he would find a way to save his son. He just had no idea that across the city, a tired nurse finishing her night shift would soon become the answer to his desperate prayers. Ashley finally arrived home at 8:30 in the morning, after stopping at the grocery store to buy ingredients for the cheapest meal she could devise for the week. Her mother was in the kitchen, slowly preparing coffee with hands that moved carefully to avoid pain. Carmen Rodriguez had once been a vibrant woman who filled their small apartment with music and laughter, but years of hard work and worry had taken their toll. "How was your night, mija?" Carmen asked in Spanish, the language they always used when they were alone together. "Long," Ashley replied, kissing her mother's cheek and taking over the coffee preparation. "Mrs. Patterson in 314 is finally going home today. Her daughter drove down from Flagstaff to pick her up." Carmen smiled. "That's wonderful. You always remember their stories." It was true. Ashley had a gift for connecting with her patients and their families, for remembering details that mattered and offering comfort in small ways. It was part of what made her such a good nurse, even if it sometimes made the job more emotionally demanding. She carried pieces of every patient with her, celebrating their victories and mourning their losses as if they were her own family. "Mama, about the rent," Ashley began, but Carmen waved her off. "Don't worry about that right now. You just worked all night. Rest first, worry later." But Ashley couldn't turn off the worry that easily. She had been calculating numbers in her head during the drive home, trying to figure out how to make the rent payment without falling behind on other bills. Her next paycheck wouldn't come for another week, and even then, it would barely cover their expenses. She had considered asking for an advance, but pride and practicality held her back. She couldn't afford to look financially unstable at work, not when her job was the only thing standing between them and homelessness. After her mother went to her room for a nap, Ashley sat at their small kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. The numbers didn't add up no matter how she arranged them. The rent was $750, due in 3 days. She had $400 in her checking account and another $100 in savings that she had been desperately trying not to touch. Even if she picked up extra shifts, the timing wouldn't work. She considered calling her cousin Elena, who lived in Tucson and worked as a teacher. Elena had helped before, lending money during particularly difficult months, but Ashley hated asking. Elena had her own family to support and her own financial struggles. The cycle of borrowing and repaying had become a source of stress between them, even though Elena never complained. Ashley's phone rang, and she glanced at the screen to see an unknown local number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Ashley Rodriguez?" "Yes, this is Ashley. This is Dr. Williams from Desert Springs Medical Center. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Ashley's pulse quickened. Calls from doctors usually meant someone needed coverage for a shift, which could be the answer to her immediate financial problems. Not at all, Dr. Williams. How can I help you? I was wondering if you might have time to meet with me this afternoon. There's a situation involving one of our patients, a little boy, and I think you might be able to help in a very special way. Ashley frowned, confused. I'm not sure I understand. Is this about picking up a shift? Not exactly. It's more complicated than that, and I'd prefer to discuss it in person if possible. Would 3 o'clock work for you? Ashley's mind raced. She wasn't scheduled to work until Monday, and she had planned to spend the afternoon applying for additional part-time positions online. But something in Dr. Williams's tone suggested this was important, and Ashley had learned never to turn down opportunities without at least hearing the details. I can be there at 3, she said. Wonderful. Please come to my office on the 7th floor. And Ashley, thank you for being willing to listen. After ending the call, Ashley stared at her phone in confusion. Dr. Williams was a respected nephrologist who rarely interacted directly with nurses unless it was about patient care. Ashley couldn't imagine what situation would require her specific help, especially on her day off. But as she prepared to shower and catch a few hours of sleep before the meeting, Ashley had no idea that Dr. Williams' call would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about sacrifice, generosity, and the true meaning of wealth. In just a few hours, she would meet a little boy whose need would call to something deep within her soul, and her life would begin changing in ways she never could have imagined. Ashley arrived at Desert Springs Medical Center 15 minutes early, her nerves humming with curiosity and caffeine from the strong coffee she'd used to combat her exhaustion. She had managed only 3 hours of sleep, but adrenaline kept her alert as she navigated the familiar hallways toward the elevator bank. The 7th floor housed the administrative offices and specialized consultation rooms, a part of the hospital she rarely visited during her regular shifts in pediatrics. Dr. Patricia Williams' office was tastefully decorated with warm earth tones and carefully chosen artwork depicting desert landscapes. The nephrologist was a woman in her early 50s, with silver-streaked auburn hair and intelligent green eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She stood when Ashley entered, extending a firm handshake and gesturing toward a comfortable chair across from her mahogany desk. Thank you for coming, Ashley. I know this was short notice, and I appreciate your flexibility. Ashley settled into the chair, her hands folded in her lap. Of course, Dr. Williams, though I have to admit, I'm not sure why you needed to see me specifically. Dr. Williams returned to her seat and opened a thick manila folder. I want to discuss a patient with you. A 6-year-old boy named Tommy Thompson. He's been under my care for the past 6 months, and his situation is quite serious. The name didn't immediately ring a bell for Ashley, though she had cared for hundreds of children during her time at Desert Springs. Is he currently admitted? No, he's an outpatient right now, but that may change soon. Tommy has end-stage renal disease. His kidneys are functioning at less than 10% capacity, and despite dialysis 3 times a week, his condition continues to deteriorate. Ashley's heart sank. She had seen too many children with serious illnesses, and kidney disease in someone so young was particularly heartbreaking. I'm sorry to hear that. What's his prognosis? Without a transplant, he has perhaps 6 months, maybe less. We've had him on the national waiting list for 8 months now, but pediatric kidneys are rare, and his blood type and tissue markers make finding a match even more challenging. Dr. Williams paused, studying Ashley's face carefully. His father has exhausted every possible avenue. David Thompson is a prominent businessman here in Phoenix, and he's used every resource available to him. Private consultations with specialists across the country, experimental treatments, alternative therapies. Nothing has changed the fundamental reality that Tommy needs a new kidney. Ashley nodded slowly, still unsure where this conversation was heading. That must be incredibly difficult for the family. It is. David is a single father, completely devoted to his son. Tommy's mother lives in Seattle and has been tested, as have extended family members. None are compatible matches. Dr. Williams leaned forward slightly. Ashley, I called you here because I've been reviewing our database of hospital employees who've expressed interest in our organ donation awareness program. A chill ran down Ashley's spine as understanding began to dawn. Dr. Williams, are you asking me to consider? I'm asking you to consider being tested as a potential living kidney donor for Tommy. Your blood type is O negative, which is compatible with his B positive type. More importantly, based on your medical records from your employment physical, your health profile suggests you could be an excellent candidate. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge Ashley wasn't sure she was ready to cross. She had always believed in organ donation in principle, had checked the box on her driver's license years ago, but the idea of voluntary living donation had never crossed her mind. The implications were staggering, both medically and financially. I understand this is an enormous request, Dr. Williams continued gently. Living kidney donation is major surgery with real risks and a significant recovery period. I would never ask this lightly, but Tommy is running out of time and you could literally save his life. Ashley's mind raced through a dozen practical concerns. The surgery, the recovery time, the cost. I can't afford to miss work for weeks or months. My mother depends on me and I'm already struggling financially. Dr. Williams nodded sympathetically. I understand your concerns completely and they're all valid. However, I want you to know that all medical expenses related to the donation would be covered completely. Additionally, the Family and Medical Leave Act would protect your job, and there are programs to help with income replacement during recovery. How long would the recovery be? Typically, donors can return to desk work in 2 to 3 weeks and full activity in 6 to 8 weeks. As a nurse, you'd probably need about a month before returning to patient care duties. The surgery itself is done laparoscopically when possible, which significantly reduces recovery time compared to traditional open surgery. Ashley felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being asked of her. She thought about her own struggles, the rent payment due in 3 days, her mother's medical needs, the constant juggling act that was her life. How could she possibly take on something this significant when she was barely keeping her head above water? I'd like you to meet Tommy, Dr. Williams said softly, not to pressure you, but so you can understand what we're dealing with. His father is bringing him in shortly for some routine blood work. Would you be willing to spend a few minutes with them? Before Ashley could formulate a response, there was a gentle knock on the door. Dr. Williams called for them to enter, and Ashley turned to see a tall man with dark hair and worried eyes, leading a small boy by the hand. The child was pale and thin, wearing a bright red dinosaur t-shirt that seemed too large for his frame. Despite his obvious illness, his blue eyes held a spark of curiosity as he looked around the office. David, Tommy, I'd like you to meet Ashley Rodriguez. She's one of our finest pediatric nurses here at Desert Springs. Ashley stood and found herself looking into the eyes of a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. David Thompson was impeccably dressed in a way that suggested wealth, but his expensive clothes couldn't hide the exhaustion and fear etched into his features. When he shook her hand, his grip was firm but desperate, like a drowning man reaching for a lifeline. It's nice to meet you, Ashley. Dr. Williams speaks very highly of your work with children. Thank you, Ashley replied, then knelt down to Tommy's eye level. And you must be Tommy. I love your dinosaur shirt. Is that a T-Rex? Tommy's face lit up with the first genuine smile Ashley had seen from him. It's actually an Allosaurus. Most people think it's a T-Rex, but the arms are different. Allosaurus had longer arms and bigger claws. Ashley laughed, charmed by his enthusiasm. You know a lot about dinosaurs. What's your favorite? Probably Brachiosaurus because they were so big, but they only ate plants. Or maybe Triceratops, because they had 3 horns and could protect themselves. Tommy's animation faded slightly. I used to want to be a paleontologist, but now I'm too tired to dig for fossils. The casual way Tommy mentioned his limitations broke Ashley's heart. He was a little boy who should be running and playing and dreaming big dreams, instead resigned to a life constrained by medical appointments and treatments. David's voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. Tommy's always been fascinated by dinosaurs. We used to spend hours in the backyard pretending to excavate dig sites. We found a really good tooth once, Tommy added. Daddy buried it for me to find, but I pretended it was real. Ashley felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition that transcended logic or practicality. Looking at this brave little boy who spoke so matter-of-factly about his limitations, she felt a pull she couldn't ignore. This wasn't just about medical need or surgical procedures. This was about a child whose dreams were being stolen by circumstances beyond anyone's control. Tommy, would you like to see something cool? Ashley asked, pulling out her phone. She had photos from a recent visit to the Desert Museum, including some shots of dinosaur exhibits. Tommy's eyes grew wide as she showed him pictures of fossil displays and reconstructed skeletons. Those are amazing. Daddy, can we go there when I'm feeling better? David's voice was carefully controlled. Absolutely, buddy. As soon as Dr. Williams says you're up for it. While Tommy was absorbed in the photos, David moved closer to Ashley. Dr. Williams tells me you might be willing to help us, he said, quietly. I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'm grateful you're even considering it. Most people wouldn't even listen to such a request. Ashley looked from David's desperate hope to Tommy's innocent enthusiasm and felt the weight of an impossible decision settling on her shoulders. I need time to think about it. This is bigger than anything I've ever considered. Of course, David said immediately. Take all the time you need. I just want you to know that if you decide to move forward, I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything again. The medical expenses, time off work, anything you need during recovery, anything at all. There was something in the way he said it that made Ashley look at him more carefully. His clothes were expensive, yes, but she was beginning to sense that David Thompson might be more than just comfortably well off. The offer to cover anything at all suggested resources beyond what most people could access. Dr. Williams stepped back into the conversation. Ashley, why don't you take some time to research living donation? I can provide you with comprehensive information about the process, risks, and recovery. There's no pressure to decide immediately. Tommy looked up from the phone and handed it back to Ashley. Thank you for showing me the dinosaurs. Are you going to help make me better? The directness of his question caught Ashley off guard. Children had a way of cutting through adult complications to reach the heart of matters. I'm going to think about it very seriously, Tommy. That's a promise. Okay, Tommy said simply, as if her promise was worth more than all the medical consultations and second opinions money could buy. After David and Tommy left for their appointment, Ashley remained in Dr. Williams' office, staring out the window at the Phoenix skyline. The doctor gave her several pamphlets about living kidney donation, contact information for donor coordinators, and a detailed explanation of the testing process that would determine if she was truly a suitable match. Ashley, I want you to understand that I'm not asking you to make this decision lightly. Living donation is a serious commitment with real risks. You need to be absolutely certain it's something you want to do, not something you feel obligated to do. What are the risks exactly? The mortality risk is very low, less than 1 in 3,000. More common risks include bleeding, infection, and reaction to anesthesia, similar to any major surgery. Long-term, most donors live completely normal lives with no restrictions. Your remaining kidney will compensate for the loss, and your overall life expectancy shouldn't be affected. Ashley absorbed this information, trying to weigh risks against the image of Tommy's hopeful face. And if I'm a match, how quickly could the surgery happen? If you test as a perfect match and decide to proceed, we could schedule surgery within 2 to 3 weeks. Tommy's condition is deteriorating rapidly enough that we wouldn't want to wait longer than necessary. The drive home gave Ashley time to process what had just happened. She had walked into Dr. Williams's office, expecting a request to pick up extra shifts, and instead found herself contemplating one of the most significant decisions of her life. The rational part of her mind catalogued all the reasons why this was impractical, dangerous, and potentially financially disastrous. But another part of her, the part that had become a nurse to help people, couldn't stop thinking about Tommy's quiet acceptance of his limitations and his father's barely contained desperation. When she arrived home, Carmen was in the living room watching her afternoon telenovela, but she muted the television when Ashley entered. "You look troubled, Mija. What happened at the hospital?" Ashley sat down beside her mother and found herself telling the entire story. Carmen listened without interruption, her weathered hands folded in her lap, her dark eyes never leaving Ashley's face. When Ashley finished, the silence stretched between them like a held breath. "This little boy," Carmen said finally, "he needs you." "Mama, it's major surgery. I'd be out of work for weeks, maybe months. We can't afford that right now." Carmen reached over and took Ashley's hands in her own. "Mija, do you remember when you were 8 years old and we found that injured bird in our courtyard?" Ashley smiled despite her anxiety. "The sparrow with the broken wing. You insisted we take it to the veterinarian even though we didn't have money for our own doctor visits. You spent every penny of your birthday money to help that little bird. It was just a bird, Mama." "No, it wasn't just a bird. It was a creature that needed help, and you couldn't walk away from that need. That's who you are, Ashley. That's who you've always been." Carmen squeezed her daughter's hands. "This little boy, he's not just any little boy. He's the little boy you're meant to help. But what if something goes wrong? What if I can't work for months? What if we lose the apartment?" Carmen's voice was firm. "Then we'll figure it out. We always do. But if you walk away from this because of fear, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." That evening, Ashley sat at her kitchen table with the pamphlets Dr. Williams had given her, spread out like tarot cards, revealing an uncertain future. The medical information was thorough and honest about both risks and benefits. The testimonials from other living donors were overwhelmingly positive, describing the surgery as one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives. But it was the financial reality that kept her awake that night. Even with medical expenses covered and job protection through FMLA, she would be facing weeks without her weekend clinic income and potentially months before she could pick up extra shifts. The timing couldn't be worse, with rent due and bills mounting. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This is David Thompson. Dr. Williams gave me your contact information. I hope that's okay. I wanted you to know that Tommy has been talking about you all afternoon. He's convinced you're going to help him become strong enough to go on dinosaur expeditions again. No pressure intended, just thought you should know the impact you've already had. Whatever you decide, thank you for caring enough to listen." Ashley stared at the message for a long time before typing back a simple response. "Thank you for sharing that. I'm still thinking everything through." Indeed, but as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar sounds of her mother moving carefully through their small apartment, Ashley realized that her decision had already been made somewhere deeper than rational thought could reach. Tommy's face had lodged itself in her heart, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she couldn't live with herself if she didn't at least try to help him. The next morning, she called Dr. Williams' office and scheduled an appointment to begin the donor evaluation process. The donor evaluation process began 3 days later in a sterile conference room that smelled of antiseptic and fresh coffee. Ashley sat across from a team of medical professionals who would determine whether she was physically and psychologically suitable to donate a kidney to a child she had known for less than a week. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was volunteering for one of the most scrutinized medical procedures in existence while struggling to afford basic health care for herself. Dr. Sarah Chen, the transplant coordinator, was a petite woman with kind eyes who had been guiding living donors through this process for over a decade. She explained that the evaluation would take several weeks and involve extensive blood work, imaging studies, psychological assessments, and consultations with multiple specialists. Every aspect of Ashley's physical and mental health would be examined under a microscope to ensure she could safely undergo surgery and live normally with one kidney. The most important thing to understand, Dr. Chen explained, is that you can withdraw from the process at any time, for any reason, and we will support that decision completely. Donor autonomy is paramount in living donation. Ashley nodded, though she knew in her heart that barring any medical contraindications, she was committed to seeing this through. The image of Tommy's brave smile and matter-of-fact acceptance of his limitations had taken up permanent residence in her thoughts. The first round of tests was scheduled for the following Monday. Ashley would need to take time off from her regular shift, something that required careful negotiation with her supervisor. She had been deliberately vague about the reason, saying only that she needed time for important medical appointments. The truth felt too precious and fragile to share with anyone, except her mother and the medical team. Over the weekend, Ashley found herself researching everything she could about living kidney donation. She read medical journals, donor testimonials, and surgical outcome statistics until her eyes burned from staring at her laptop screen. The more she learned, the more confident she became that this was something she could physically handle. The psychological aspect was more complicated. What did it mean to give part of yourself to save someone else's child? The philosophical implications kept her awake at night, staring at the water stain on her bedroom ceiling and wondering if she was being incredibly generous or incredibly foolish. Maybe both. Monday morning arrived grey and drizzly, unusual weather for Phoenix that seemed to match Ashley's nervous energy. She reported to the hospital at 7 a.m. for what Dr. Chen had warned would be a long day of testing. Blood work came. First, vial after vial, drawn to check everything from kidney function to infectious diseases to genetic markers that might affect compatibility. The phlebotomist, a cheerful woman named Rosa, chatted easily in Spanish when she heard Ashley's last name. Rodriguez, my family is from Sonora. Where are your people from? Guadalajara originally, Ashley replied, grateful for the distraction from watching her blood fill tube after tube. My grandmother used to make the most incredible pozole. Ah, a woman who knows good food. That's always a good sign. The E. Casual conversation helped Ashley relax, reminding her that even in this sterile medical environment, human connections could flourish. It was something she had learned as a nurse, the power of small talk and genuine interest to ease anxiety and build trust. After blood work came imaging studies, CT scans, ultrasounds and chest x-rays that would reveal the anatomy of her kidneys and ensure she had no hidden health problems that might complicate surgery. Ashley lay on the examination table listening to the mechanical whirring of machines. that could see inside her body with startling clarity, mapping the organs she had never really thought about until now. The ultrasound technician, concentrating on her screen, occasionally pointed out structures to Ashley. "Beautiful kidneys," she said with professional appreciation. "Good size, excellent blood flow, no abnormalities that I can see." It was strange to have someone compliment her internal organs, but Ashley found herself oddly proud. Her kidneys, it seemed, were overachievers. The psychological evaluation came in the afternoon with Dr. Michael Foster, a thoughtful man with a grey beard who specialized in assessing potential organ donors. His office was deliberately calming, with soft lighting and comfortable furniture that felt more like a living room than a medical facility. "Tell me about your decision to consider donation," Dr. Foster began, settling back in his chair with a notepad that he barely seemed to reference. Ashley found herself describing her first meeting with Tommy, the way his enthusiasm for dinosaurs had pierced through her practical concerns, and the growing certainty that she couldn't walk away from his need. Dr. Foster listened without judgment, occasionally asking gentle questions that helped her articulate feelings she hadn't fully processed herself. "Have you considered the possibility that Tommy might not survive the transplant, even if it's successful initially?" The question hit Ashley like a physical blow. She had been so focused on the surgery itself that she hadn't allowed herself to think about longer-term outcomes. "I suppose I've been assuming that if I can help him, everything will be fine." "It's natural to focus on the hope," Dr. Foster said kindly, "but part of my job is to ensure you understand all the possible outcomes. Pediatric transplants have excellent success rates, but there are never guarantees in medicine." Ashley was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this reality. "If I don't try, he'll definitely die. If I do try, he has a chance to live. Those seem like acceptable odds to me." Dr. Foster made a note, then looked up with something that might have been approval. "Tell me about your support system. Who will help you during recovery?" "My mother. She's been through her own health challenges, so she understands what recovery looks like. And I have colleagues at work who've offered to help however they can." What Ashley didn't mention was her growing anxiety about the financial implications of recovery. Even with medical expenses covered and FMLA protection, she would be losing income from her weekend clinic shifts and unable to pick up overtime for weeks. The rent payment that had been due was now 3 days overdue, and her landlord had already called twice. The testing continued throughout the week. A nuclear medicine scan that tracked radioactive dye through her kidneys to measure function. An EKG and echocardiogram to ensure her heart could handle surgery. A meeting with an anesthesiologist who reviewed her medical history and explained the risks of general anesthesia. Each test brought Ashley closer to a final determination of her suitability as a donor, but it also brought her closer to David Thompson in unexpected ways. He had insisted on being present for every appointment, not interfering with the medical process, but simply being available in case Ashley had questions or needed support. It was during the 3rd day of testing that Ashley began to understand the true scope of David's resources and influence. She was waiting for her appointment with the nephrologist when she overheard a conversation between David and Dr. Williams in the hallway outside the consultation room. "The new pediatric dialysis unit will be ready for dedication next month," Dr. Williams was saying. "The Thompson Foundation's contribution made it possible to incorporate all the latest technology." "Oh, I'm just glad we could help," David replied. "When this is all over, I want to make sure other families don't have to wait as long as we have." Ashley felt a chill of realization. The Thompson Foundation. She had seen that name on plaques throughout the hospital, crediting donations for everything from new equipment to entire wings. David wasn't just wealthy, He was philanthropically wealthy, the kind of person whose generosity shaped institutions and saved lives on a massive scale. When Dr. Williams called her into the consultation room, Ashley's mind was reeling with the implications of what she had learned. The nephrologist reviewed her test results with obvious satisfaction, confirming that her kidney function was excellent and her overall health status ideal for donation. "Your blood type and tissue markers are a very good match for Tommy," Dr. Williams explained. "Not perfect, which would be extremely rare, but excellent enough that we would expect successful engraftment and long-term function." Ashley nodded, trying to focus on the medical information while processing her new understanding of David's identity. After the appointment, David walked with her toward the hospital exit, and Ashley found herself studying him with new eyes. "David, can I ask you something?" "Of course. The Thompson Foundation, that's your foundation, isn't it?" David stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Yes, it is. Does that change anything for you?" Ashley considered the question carefully. "I'm not sure. I knew you had resources, but I didn't realize the extent. It makes me wonder if there are other options you haven't explored, other ways to help Tommy that don't involve a stranger risking surgery." "Ashley, do you think I haven't considered every possible alternative? I've consulted with specialists around the world, funded research into artificial kidneys, even looked into xenotransplantation using pig organs. Money can buy access to the best medical care in existence, but it can't create a compatible kidney when none exists." David's voice carried the weight of months of desperate searching. "The foundation exists because I believe wealth should be used to solve problems, to help people who can't help themselves. But this time, the person who can't help himself is my own son, and all the money in the world doesn't matter if we can't find a donor." They stood in the hospital lobby, surrounded by the controlled chaos of medical life continuing around them. Ashley watched David's carefully composed facade crack slightly, revealing the terrified father beneath the successful businessman. "I need you to know something," David continued. "If you decide to do this, it won't be because you have to. It will be because you choose to. And that choice, that generosity, will be something I spend the rest of my life trying to deserve." That evening, Ashley sat in her small kitchen with test results and informational pamphlets spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle she was still learning to assemble. Carmen joined her with 2 cups of tea, settling into the chair across from her daughter with the careful movements of someone whose joints protested every position change. "The tests went well?" Carmen asked. "Very well. Dr. Williams says I'm an excellent candidate. The surgery could happen as early as next week if I give final approval." Carmen studied her daughter's face. "But something is troubling you." Ashley sighed. "I found out today that Tommy's father is incredibly wealthy. The Thompson Foundation, Mama. They've donated millions to the hospital, probably to medical research, children's charities, everything you can imagine." "And this bothers you?" "I don't know. It makes me wonder about his motives, about whether he sees this as just another transaction he can fund." Carmen was quiet for a moment, sipping her tea and considering her words. "Mija, when you decided to become a nurse, did you choose to help only poor patients? Only people who couldn't afford to pay for their care?" "Of course not. I help whoever needs help." "And when you see a child in pain, do you ask about their parents' bank account before you offer comfort?" Ashley smiled ruefully, understanding where her mother was leading her. "No, I don't. This little boy, his blood doesn't know how much money his father has. His kidneys don't work better or worse because of his family's wealth. He's just a sick child who needs help, and you're the person who can provide that help." Carmen reached across the table and covered Ashley's hand with her own. "The measure of a gift isn't the wealth of the person who receives it. It's the love of the person who gives it." That night, Ashley called Dr. Chen and gave her final authorization to proceed with the transplant surgery. The coordinator was warm but professional, explaining that surgery would be scheduled for the following Tuesday, giving both Ashley and Tommy time for final preparations and pre-operative care. "I want you to know," Dr. Chen said, "that in my 10 years coordinating living donations, I've never seen a donor more thoroughly considered in their decision-making. Tommy is incredibly fortunate to have found you." After ending the call, Ashley sat in her darkened living room, listening to the familiar sounds of her neighborhood settling into night. Sirens in the distance, the hum of air conditioners working. Against the desert heat, the soft murmur of Spanish conversation from the apartment next door. These were the sounds of her world, the life she had built from determination and necessity. In 1 week she would undergo surgery that would fundamentally change her body and possibly her entire future. She would give a piece of herself to save a child she barely knew, trusting that the decision was right, even though she couldn't see all the consequences that might follow. Her phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Ashley, I know you've made your final decision, and I want you to know how grateful our entire family is. Tommy doesn't fully understand what you're doing for him, but I promise you that when he's old enough to comprehend it, he'll know that he's alive because of your courage. Thank you doesn't seem sufficient, but it's all I have right now." "Thank you," Ashley typed back a simple response. "See you Tuesday." But as she prepared for bed, Ashley had no idea that David's gratitude would soon manifest in ways that would challenge every assumption she had ever made about wealth, generosity, and the true meaning of life-changing gifts. The surgery that would save Tommy's life was about to transform her own in ways she never could have imagined. The morning of the transplant arrived with the kind of crystal-clear desert sunrise that made Phoenix famous, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Ashley woke at 4 a.m. without an alarm, her body humming with nervous energy despite the pre-operative medications she had taken the night before. The hospital had provided detailed instructions about fasting, hygiene, and mental preparation, but nothing could truly prepare someone for voluntarily walking into surgery to give away a vital organ. Carmen was already awake in the kitchen, moving quietly, as she prepared a thermos of coffee she wouldn't be able to drink for hours. Her arthritis made early mornings particularly difficult, but she had insisted on driving Ashley to the hospital, despite Ashley's protests that David had offered to provide transportation. "This is something a mother does," Carmen had said firmly when Ashley tried to dissuade her. "You are giving life to another child. I will be there when you wake up, just as I was there when you first opened your eyes 28 years ago." The drive to Desert Springs Medical Center was mostly silent, both women lost in their own thoughts as Phoenix slowly awakened around them. Street sweepers methodically cleaned the previous day's debris while early commuters began their journeys to jobs that suddenly seemed trivial compared to what lay ahead. Ashley watched the familiar cityscape pass by her window, wondering if she would see it differently when she returned home, changed forever by what she was about to do. At the hospital, they were met by Dr. Chen, who guided them through the pre-operative process with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times. Ashley changed into surgical scrubs and had an IV placed in her left arm, the small pinch of the needle a preview of much greater discomfort to come. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Martinez, reviewed her medical history one final time and explained what she would experience as she went under general anesthesia. "The last thing you'll remember is feeling sleepy," he said with a reassuring smile. "The next thing you'll know, you'll be waking up in recovery with one less kidney and the knowledge that you've saved a little boy's life." David and Tommy arrived shortly after 7 a.m., both looking nervous but determined. Tommy was scheduled for surgery in the adjacent operating room, where Dr. Williams and her team would remove his damaged kidneys and implant Ashley's healthy organ. The coordination required was precise, with both surgeries beginning simultaneously to minimize the time Ashley's kidney would spend outside a human body. Tommy approached Ashley's bedside with the careful steps of a child who had spent too much time in medical settings. He was wearing hospital scrubs decorated with cartoon dinosaurs, a small concession to his age in an environment that often forgot children were still children despite their medical complexities. "Are you scared?" Tommy asked with the directness that only children could manage. Ashley considered lying, offering the kind of adult reassurance that would minimize his worry. But something in Tommy's wise eyes suggested he deserved honesty. "A little bit," she admitted, "but I'm also excited to help you feel better." Tommy nodded solemnly. "Daddy says you're giving me one of your kidneys so I don't have to go to dialysis anymore." "That's right. Your body will take very good care of it, and you'll be able to run and play and go on all those dinosaur expeditions you've been planning." "Will you come with me on a dinosaur expedition when we're both better?" The innocent question hit Ashley with unexpected force. Here was a child planning future adventures that included her, assuming a relationship that would continue beyond this medical transaction. "I would love that, Tommy. We'll find the biggest dinosaur bones in Arizona." David stood beside his son's bed, his usual composure cracking as he watched the interaction between Ashley and Tommy. When Tommy was distracted by a nurse checking his preoperative vital signs, David moved closer to Ashley. "I don't know how to thank you for this," he said quietly. "Everything I have, everything I've built, it all seems meaningless compared to what you're doing for us." "You don't need to thank me," Ashley replied. "This is what people do for each other." David shook his head. "No, Ashley, this is what extraordinary people do. And I promise you, when this is over, your life is going to change in ways that reflect just how extraordinary you are." Before Ashley could ask what he meant, the surgical teams arrived to transport both patients to their respective operating rooms. Ashley kissed her mother goodbye, squeezed Tommy's small hand, and allowed herself to be wheeled toward a future she couldn't yet imagine. The operating room was a marvel of modern technology, with monitors and equipment that could track every aspect of her body's function during the complex procedure. Dr. Rebecca Santos, the surgeon who would perform Ashley's nephrectomy, was a woman in her 40s with steady hands and a reputation for excellence in minimally invasive techniques. "We're going to take excellent care of you," Dr. Santos said as Ashley was positioned on the operating table. "When you wake up, you'll have 3 small incisions instead of 1 large one, which means much faster recovery and less pain." The anesthesia mask descended over Ashley's face, and Dr. Martinez's voice became her anchor to consciousness. "Take deep breaths and count backward from 10. Ashley managed to reach 7 before the world dissolved into peaceful darkness. The surgery took 4 hours, a duration that felt both eternal and instantaneous to Carmen, who waited in the family lounge with updates arriving every hour like lighthouse signals in a fog of anxiety. David joined her partway through, his own surgery having been completed successfully, and together they maintained the vigil that families of surgical patients had kept for generations. "She's remarkable, your daughter," David said during one of their quiet conversations. "I've met a lot of people in my life, but I've never encountered anyone with her combination of courage and compassion." Carmen studied David carefully, seeing, beyond his expensive clothes and obvious wealth, to the father who was desperately grateful for Ashley's gift. "She has always been this way. When she was small, she would bring home injured animals, homeless friends, anyone who needed help. I used to worry she would give away too much of herself. Maybe giving away pieces of ourselves is what makes us whole, David replied thoughtfully. When Dr. Santos finally emerged from surgery, her smile told them everything they needed to know before she spoke a word. Ashley did beautifully. The kidney was perfect, healthy, and transplanted without any complications. She's in recovery now and should be awake within the hour. Relief flooded through Carmen like a physical force, and she found herself crying. Tears she hadn't realized she was holding back. David placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his own eyes bright with emotion. "And Tommy?" David asked. "Dr. Williams will update you shortly. But from what I could see, the transplant went flawlessly. Your son's new kidney was producing urine within minutes of transplantation, which is exactly what we hope to see." Ashley's first awareness was of voices, distant and echoing, as if heard through water. Gradually, the world came into focus, revealing a recovery room filled with monitoring equipment and the soft sounds of medical activity. Pain registered next, a deep ache in her left side that was significant but manageable, exactly as Dr. Santos had predicted. Carmen appeared beside her bed, eyes red from crying, but face radiant with relief. "Mija, you're awake. The surgery went perfectly." Ashley's throat was dry from the breathing tube, making her voice hoarse when she tried to speak. "Tommy?" "His surgery was successful too," Carmen said, squeezing Ashley's hand. "Dr. Williams says the kidney is working beautifully." Overwhelming. Emotion flooded through Ashley, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and something approaching euphoria. She had done it. She had actually done it. Somewhere in this hospital, a little boy was beginning his recovery with her kidney filtering his blood, cleaning his system, giving him back his future. Over the next several hours, as Ashley drifted in and out of medication-induced sleep, she became aware of an unusual level of attention surrounding her care. Nurses checked on her more frequently than seemed standard, and there were flowers, cards, and gifts arriving with such regularity that her room began to resemble a florist's shop. "Where are all these coming from?" Ashley asked Carmen during one of her more lucid moments. Carmen looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the hallway before answering. "Word has gotten out about what you did. People are calling you a hero." "I'm not a hero. I just helped a little boy." "Sometimes those are the same thing, Mia." Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression Ashley couldn't quite read. "Ashley, how are you feeling?" "Sore, but good. When can I see Tommy?" "Soon. He's doing remarkably well, better than we dared hope. The kidney function is excellent, and he's already talking about going home." Dr. Chen paused, consulting her tablet. "Ashley, I need to discuss something with you. There have been some unusual developments regarding your care and recovery." Ashley frowned, immediately worried. "Is something wrong? Are there complications?" "No, nothing medical. It's more about your post-operative arrangements. Mr. Thompson has made some requests regarding your recovery care that are quite extensive." "Duh! What kind of requests?" Dr. Chen looked increasingly uncomfortable. "He's arranged for you to have a private suite for the remainder of your hospital stay, with round-the-clock private nursing care. He's also set up home health services for your recovery period, including physical therapy, housekeeping, and meal preparation." Ashley felt a chill of unease. "Dr. Chen, that's incredibly generous, but I can't accept all that. It's too much." "There's more, Ashley. He's also established a fund to cover your living expenses during recovery, and has made arrangements with your employer to ensure you receive full pay during your medical leave." The room seemed to tilt slightly, and Ashley wasn't sure if it was the pain medication or shock causing her disorientation. "He can't do that. I mean, he can't just take over my life like that." "He's not taking over anything," said a familiar voice from the doorway. David Thompson stepped into the room, looking slightly sheepish but determined. "I'm just trying to ensure you're properly cared for while you recover from surgery you underwent to save my son's life." Ashley struggled to sit up straighter, ignoring the pull of her surgical incisions. "David, this is too much. I didn't do this expecting anything in return." "I know you didn't. That's exactly why you deserve everything I'm trying to give you." David moved closer to her bed, his expression earnest. "Ashley, do you have any idea what you've given us? Tommy is going to live. He's going to grow up, go to school, have adventures, maybe become the paleontologist he dreams of being. You gave him his future back. Any compatible donor would have done the same thing." David shook his head firmly. "No, they wouldn't have. We were on waiting lists for months. Other potential donors were approached and declined. You're the only person who said yes when it mattered most." Dr. Chen cleared her throat gently. "Ashley, I should mention that Mr. Thompson has also made a significant donation to establish a living donor support program here at the hospital. The Thompson Foundation's gift will ensure that future donors receive comprehensive care and support throughout their recovery." Ashley felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening around her. She had expected to recover quietly at home with her mother's help, return to work when medically cleared, and resume her life knowing she had helped save Tommy. Instead, she found herself at the center of what felt like a carefully orchestrated campaign to transform her circumstances. "I need some time to process all this," Ashley said finally. "This is a lot to take in." David nodded understandingly. "Of course, take all the time you need. But Ashley, I want you to understand something. This isn't charity and it's not pity. It's gratitude and it's recognition of something extraordinary. You saved my son's life when you had every reason to say no. Your own financial struggles, your mother's needs, the risks of surgery, everything in your practical world argued against donation. But you did it anyway because it was the right thing to do." He paused, his voice becoming quieter but more intense. "Do you know what that kind of moral courage is worth? It's worth everything I have and more. The money I'm spending on your care and recovery, it's not a burden or an obligation. It's the most meaningful investment I've ever made." Ashley closed her eyes, feeling the weight of David's words and the magnitude of the changes being thrust upon her. When she opened them again, she saw not just a wealthy businessman trying to assuage his guilt, but a father whose world had been saved by her decision to act when action was needed most. "Can I see Tommy?" she asked softly. David's face broke into the first genuine smile she had seen from him since they met. "He's been asking for you every hour. Dr. Williams says you can visit as soon as you're feeling up to a short wheelchair ride." 30 minutes later, Ashley found herself being wheeled down the hospital corridor toward Tommy's room, her surgical gown covered by a robe that Carmen had brought from home. The short journey left her breathless and reminded her that recovery would be longer and more challenging than she had initially anticipated. Tommy's room was filled with the same abundance of flowers and gifts that had overwhelmed Ashley's space, but the little boy himself was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. His color was better, his eyes brighter, and when he saw her, being wheeled through the doorway, his face lit up with pure joy. "Ashley, you're awake. Daddy said your kidney is working perfectly in my body." Ashley felt tears she couldn't control flowing down her cheeks. "How do you feel, Tommy?" "Different. Better. Like I've been really thirsty for a long time and finally got to drink water." Tommy's description was surprisingly accurate for a 6-year-old, capturing the essence of what functioning kidneys meant for someone whose had been failing. "Dr. Williams says I can go home in a few days, and that maybe in a month or two I'll be strong enough for our dinosaur expedition." Ashley reached out to take Tommy's small hand, marveling at how something as simple as improved circulation was already making his skin warmer and pinker. "I can't wait for that expedition. We're going to find the most amazing fossils." As Ashley sat beside Tommy's bed, listening to his excited chatter about all the things he wanted to do when he was stronger, she began to understand that David's elaborate arrangements for her care weren't really about gratitude or obligation. They were about recognition, about acknowledging that what she had done transcended normal human interaction and deserved a response that was equally extraordinary. But she had no idea that this was only the beginning, that David's gratitude would soon manifest in ways that would challenge every assumption she had ever made about wealth, opportunity, and the true meaning of life-changing generosity. 2 weeks later, Ashley sat in the passenger seat of a luxury sedan she never could have afforded, watching the Phoenix skyline grow smaller in the rearview mirror as they drove toward what David had mysteriously described as a small gathering to celebrate Tommy's recovery. She had been discharged from the hospital 3 days earlier, feeling stronger each day as her body adapted to functioning with one kidney. The incision sites were healing well, and Dr. Santos had pronounced her recovery exemplary. The past 14 days had been a whirlwind of changes that Ashley still struggled to comprehend. True to his word, David had arranged for comprehensive home care that transformed her modest apartment in Maryvale into something resembling a private medical facility. A registered nurse named Patricia visited twice daily to monitor Ashley's recovery, while a physical therapist helped her regain strength and mobility. Housekeeping services ensured that Carmen never had to strain her arthritic hands cleaning, and a meal delivery program brought nutritious restaurant-quality food that neither woman could have imagined affording, but it was the financial arrangement that left Ashley most bewildered. David had somehow coordinated with her employer to ensure she received full salary during her medical leave, despite the fact that she had no accumulated sick time or disability benefits. Her weekend clinic shifts were being covered by temporary nurses funded through what her supervisor mysteriously called a community health grant. Most shocking of all, when Ashley checked her bank account during her second day home, she discovered that her student loan debt had been completely eliminated. "David, you can't just pay off my student loans," Ashley had protested during one of his daily check-in calls. "Why not?" he had replied matter-of-factly. "You gave me my son's life. The least I can do is give you financial freedom to pursue your own dreams without the burden of debt." Now, as they drove through Scottsdale toward an address Ashley didn't recognize, she found herself both grateful and deeply uncomfortable with the magnitude of David's generosity. Carmen sat beside her, wearing a new dress that David had somehow arranged to have delivered in her exact size, looking simultaneously pleased and overwhelmed by the attention they were receiving. "Where exactly are we going?" Ashley asked the driver, a polite man named James, who had introduced himself as David's assistant. "Mr. Thompson has arranged a small celebration at his home," James replied. "Nothing elaborate, just family and a few close friends who wanted to meet the woman who saved Tommy's life." Ashley's stomach fluttered with nervousness. She had never been comfortable being the center of attention, and the idea of being celebrated for something that felt so fundamentally right made her uneasy. She had saved Tommy because she could, not because she wanted recognition or reward. The sedan turned into a gated community that spoke of wealth beyond Ashley's previous comprehension. Manicured landscapes stretched between custom homes that looked more like resorts than residences, each positioned to maximize views of the surrounding desert mountains. When they finally stopped in front of David's estate, Ashley understood for the first time the true scope of his resources. The house was a masterpiece of southwestern architecture, with clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that brought the desert landscape indoors. A circular drive led to an entrance where David and Tommy waited, both dressed casually but elegantly. Tommy ran toward the car as soon as Ashley emerged. His energy and color dramatically improved from their last meeting. "Ashley, look how fast I can run now." Tommy demonstrated with a sprint across the driveway that would have been impossible just weeks earlier. His transformation was nothing short of miraculous, a living testament to the success of the transplant. "That's amazing, Tommy. You're like a real-life dinosaur hunter now." Tommy beamed with pride, then grabbed Ashley's hand to lead her toward the house. "Wait until you see the surprise Daddy prepared for you." David approached more slowly, his expression combining joy at his son's recovery with something Ashley couldn't quite identify. "Ashley, Carmen, welcome to our home. I hope you don't mind, but we have a few people here who wanted to express their gratitude personally." As they entered the house, Ashley was struck by its understated elegance. Despite its obvious cost, the home felt warm and lived in, with family photographs and Tommy's artwork displayed alongside museum-quality art. French doors led to a backyard that seemed to stretch endlessly into the desert, where perhaps 30 people were gathered around. A pool that reflected the late afternoon sun like liquid gold. "Ashley, I'd like you to meet some people," David said, guiding her toward the gathering. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and conversations that left Ashley increasingly bewildered. She met Dr. Williams and other medical staff from the hospital, but also philanthropists, business leaders, and community activists who spoke about Ashley's story as if it had already become legend. Several people mentioned having heard about her donation through news coverage Ashley wasn't aware existed. "You probably don't realize," said Maria Santos, a woman who introduced herself as director of a non-profit supporting organ donation awareness, "but your story has inspired dozens of people to register as potential living donors. We've seen a 30% increase in donor registrations since news of Tommy's transplant became public." Ashley felt simultaneously proud and overwhelmed. She had acted to save one little boy, not to become a symbol or inspiration for others. The weight of unexpected influence settled on her shoulders like an unfamiliar garment. Throughout the afternoon, Tommy stayed close to Ashley's side, introducing her to guests as "my kidney friend," with the innocent pride of a child who understood that something wonderful had happened without fully grasping its complexity. His energy seemed boundless, a stark contrast to the pale, tired boy Ashley had first met in Dr. Williams' office. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of amber and rose, David approached Ashley where she sat beside the pool, with Carmen, both women still adjusting to their surroundings. "Ashley, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" They walked to a quiet corner of the garden where desert plants created a natural alcove overlooking the valley below. Phoenix stretched out beneath them, its lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "I have something for you," David said, reaching into his jacket pocket and withdrawing a sealed envelope. "Before you say anything, I want you to understand that this isn't charity or pity or even gratitude, though I am more grateful than I could ever express. This is recognition of what you've done and an investment in what you could do." Ashley took the envelope with trembling hands, her heart racing. "David, you've already done so much. The medical care, the financial support, paying off my loans. It's been overwhelming." "Open it," David said quietly. Inside the envelope was a single document, but its contents made Ashley's knees weak. It was a deed to a house transferred into her name for a property located in the upscale Ahwatukee neighborhood. Attached was a check for an amount that made Ashley's eyes blur with tears she couldn't control. $5 million. "David, I can't accept this. This is insane. I can't take $5 million for doing what any decent person would do." David's voice was gentle but firm. "Ashley, let me tell you what $5 million means to me. It's less than the profit Thompson Energy Solutions generates in a typical month. It's less than I spent on my last yacht, which I sold because..." I realized I didn't need it. It's a fraction of what I've donated to various charities without thinking twice. He paused, looking out over the city lights. But let me tell you what your kidney means to me. It means I get to watch my son grow up. It means Tommy will graduate from high school, go to college, maybe have children of his own someday. It means every morning for the rest of my life I'll wake up knowing my child is alive because of your courage. Ashley stared at the check, trying to process numbers that had no meaning in her previous experience. David, this is a fortune. This could change everything. That's exactly the point. You changed everything for us. And now I want to change everything for you. This money isn't just a gift, Ashley. It's an opportunity. You could go back to school, specialize in pediatric nephrology, maybe even start your own foundation to support living organ donors. You could take the compassion and courage that saved Tommy and use it to save hundreds of other children. Carmen had approached quietly and now stood beside her daughter, her own eyes wide with disbelief as she glimpsed the check. Mija, this is more money than our family has seen in generations. Exactly, David said, and Ashley earned every penny of it by making a choice that most people wouldn't make. She risked her health, her financial stability, her future to save a child. She barely knew. That kind of moral courage is priceless, but it should also be rewarded. Ashley looked from the check to the deed to Tommy, who was playing with other children in the pool, his laughter carrying across the evening air. The little boy who had been dying was now splashing and diving like any healthy 6-year-old, his body strong and his future unlimited. I don't know what to say, Ashley whispered. Say you'll accept it, David replied. Say you'll use this opportunity to live the life you deserve and maybe help other people the way you helped us. Ashley thought about her small apartment with its leaky roof and broken air conditioning, about her mother's daily struggle with arthritis, pain they couldn't afford to treat properly, about the years of financial stress that had defined her adult life. She thought about the nursing degree she had worked so hard to earn and the pediatric specialization she had always dreamed of pursuing but could never afford. The house, Ashley said, looking at the deed again. It's really mine? 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a pool, and a garden where your mother could grow the vegetables she's always talked about. It's in a neighborhood with excellent schools, close to the hospital where you work, and far enough from your current area that you'll have privacy to adjust to your new circumstances. Carmen spoke softly in Spanish, her voice thick with emotion. Mija, this man is giving us a new life. Ashley realized that Carmen was right. David wasn't just offering money and property. He was offering freedom from the financial pressures that had constrained every decision Ashley had ever made. Freedom to pursue education, to specialize in areas that interested her, to help people without worrying about her own survival. There's one more thing, David said, pulling out another envelope. I've established the Ashley Rodriguez Foundation for Living Donor Support. It's funded with an initial $10 million, and its mission is to provide comprehensive support for people considering living organ donation. Financial assistance, medical care, recovery support, everything you needed but didn't have. Ashley felt as if the world was tilting around her. You named a foundation after me? You'll be the executive director if you choose to accept the position. The salary is substantial, and you'll have complete autonomy to develop programs that address the barriers to living donation. Think about it, Ashley. How many potential donors choose not to donate because they can't afford the time off work or the medical expenses? How many children die waiting for organs because good people can't risk their financial stability to help? The vision David painted was compelling and overwhelming. Ashley could see herself working with hospitals, donor coordinators, and potential donors to remove the practical obstacles that prevented life-saving transplants. She could use her own experience to guide others through the process, ensuring they received the support she had needed but hadn't expected. "I need time to think about all this," Ashley said finally. "Of course, take all the time you need. But Ashley, I want you to understand something. This isn't the end of our relationship. You're part of our family now. Tommy talks about you every day, asks when he'll see you again, plans adventures he wants to share with you. You didn't just save his life, you became part of his story." As if summoned by their conversation, Tommy appeared at Ashley's side, dripping wet from the pool, and grinning with the uninhibited joy of a healthy child. "Ashley, Daddy says you might be moving to a new house with a pool. Does that mean I can come swim with you sometimes?" Ashley knelt down to Tommy's level, this little boy whose need had called to something deep within her soul and changed the trajectory of her entire life. "I would love that, Tommy. We could have pool parties and plan dinosaur expeditions and maybe even start a garden where we can pretend to dig for fossils." Tommy's excitement was infectious, and Ashley felt herself beginning to accept the reality of her transformed circumstances. She looked around at the beautiful home, the successful people who had gathered to celebrate her courage, the mother whose arthritis pain could finally be properly treated, and the little boy whose laughter proved that miracles were possible when people chose love over fear. 6 months later, Ashley stood in the conference room of Phoenix Children's Hospital, addressing a group of potential living donors and their families. She wore a professional blazer over a silk blouse, her appearance polished in a way that would have been impossible during her days of working multiple jobs to survive. But it was her message, not her appearance, that commanded attention. "I want to be honest with you about living donation," she said, making eye contact with each person in the room. "It's major surgery with real risks and significant recovery. Time. It will change your life in ways you can't fully anticipate, but I also want you to know that it's the most meaningful thing I've ever done." She clicked to the next slide in her presentation, which showed a photograph of Tommy at his recent 7th birthday party, healthy and radiant as he blew out candles on a dinosaur-themed cake. "This little boy was dying when I met him. Today, he's in 2nd grade, plays soccer, and still plans to become a paleontologist. He's alive because someone was willing to take a risk to help a stranger. That someone happened to be me, but it could be any of you." After the presentation, Ashley drove to her new home in Ahwatukee, the house David had given her that had become a sanctuary where she and Carmen lived in comfort they had never imagined possible. The Ashley Rodriguez Foundation occupied a suite of offices downtown, where a staff of 6 worked to eliminate barriers to living organ donation and support donors throughout their journey. As she pulled into her driveway, Ashley saw Tommy's bicycle lying on her front lawn, evidence that he and David had arrived for their weekly dinner together. The tradition had started as a way for David to check on Ashley's recovery and had evolved into a cherished ritual that none of them wanted to end. She found them in the backyard, where Tommy was showing Carmen the fossil collection he kept in a special box in Ashley's garden shed. The little boy, who had once been too weak to dig in dirt, now spent hours searching for treasures in the carefully maintained flower beds, his enthusiasm undimmed by the fact that most of his discoveries were common rocks and broken pottery. "Ashley," Tommy called when he saw her, "look what I found today." He held up a piece of quartz that caught the evening light, treating it like the rarest gem. "That's beautiful, Tommy. We should add it to your collection." David approached with 2 glasses of iced tea, handing one to Ashley as they watched Tommy and Carmen examine his latest discoveries. "How was the donor education session today?" "Good. 3 families committed to testing, and 2 others are seriously considering it. That's 5 potential donors from 1 presentation." David nodded approvingly. "The Foundation's impact continues to grow. You've helped facilitate 47 living donations this year alone. Ashley still marveled at the numbers, at the lives being saved, because barriers to donation were being systematically removed. The foundation provided financial support, medical coordination, and emotional guidance that made the process less daunting for potential donors. It was work that felt meaningful in a way her previous jobs never had, despite their importance. Tommy starts advanced classes next month, David said. His teachers say he's reading at a 5th grade level and showing exceptional aptitude for science. Ashley smiled, watching the little boy who had inspired her greatest act of courage, now pursuing his own dreams with the energy that came from a healthy body and unlimited future. He's going to make an amazing paleontologist, as the sun set over the Phoenix Mountains, painting the sky in the brilliant colors that made desert evenings magical. Ashley reflected on the chain of events that had brought her to this moment. A chance encounter, a split-second decision, and the courage to act when action was needed had transformed not just Tommy's life, but her own. The woman who had once struggled to pay rent now lived in comfort, but more importantly, she had found her calling in work that combined her medical expertise with her natural compassion. The foundation that bore her name was changing lives across the country, making living donation accessible to people who previously couldn't consider it. But perhaps most precious of all was the family she had gained. Tommy's infectious enthusiasm for life, David's quiet strength and unwavering loyalty, and the knowledge that her decision to give had created bonds that would last a lifetime. As Tommy ran toward her with another treasure from his excavation, Ashley realized that sometimes the greatest gifts came from giving, and that courage was simply love in action. She had saved a little boy's life, but in doing so, she had discovered her own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.